Well, what if I told you that there was a substance that could provide sufficient power to run every home on the planet? That it could fuel hospitals and schools, the homes of rich and poor, that it could be harnessed to facilitate human flourishing at every single level. But it was highly volatile. It could not just fuel all these institutions, it could easily destroy hospitals, schools, homes, families. It's a volatile substance. Would you say it would be worth experimenting with? Or what if I told you, hey, I want you to be in charge of it? You harness the power and potential of this volatile substance that can give life or bring death. I want you to be responsible for it. Would you take that challenge? Would you be open to harnessing its potential, or you'd say, no, that's too dangerous. I don't want to mess with that. What if I told you didn't have a choice, that you have to? Does that make you nervous? Because here's the reality. You have to. Because the substance we're talking about is called money. And money can be the cause of great joy in human flourishing, or it can be the cause of great ruin and great pain, right? Money is a tool. It's like a knife. Is a knife good or bad? Depends on who's wielding it, right? You put it in the hands of a surgeon, a knife will save your life. You put it in the hands of a madman, it will take your life, right? It depends on how you wield it. And money's like that. Money can bring flourishing and through you do much good in the world, or money can destroy your relationships and your life. It's a volatile substance. Good tool, bad God. And for better or for worse, it's impacting you, and you got to learn how to wield it. So it's interesting, if I can state the obvious, the high percentage of people in the room are millennials, all right? And millennials, let me just tell you a little bit about you. Experian does a study about you, and they say about you, you are the generation with the fastest growing debt. Congratulations. On average, your non-mortgage debt's around $27,000. Much of that is school debt, but also much of it is credit card debt. Millennials currently outspend Gen X and boomers by about $2,300 a month. You spend more on gas, groceries, and eating out than older generations than you. Surprise. And it's affecting you. YPulse is a marketing research company that does research on millennials, and they produce a survey called the Life Goals Surveys of Millennials. And so they do a survey of your life goals. Do you want to know what your goals are? Let me tell you. All right. We'll do the top 10. Number 10, 30%. So they want to be famous. It's one of the top goals. I want to be famous. Number 9, starting a business. Number 8, becoming rich. Number 7, earning a higher degree than I have now. Coming in at number 6, raising a family. That's nice. Number 5 is owning a home. Number 4 is finding and marrying someone to love. Isn't that interesting? You're like, then what are the top 3? Number 3 is traveling. Sorry, lover, I'm going to Italy. Number 2 is have a meaningful career. Have meaning in what I put my hands to. Number 1, paying off debt. Wow. That's number 1. Isn't that interesting? So why are we talking about money? It's not because I want to, and it's not because you want me to. I can see it in your face, but it's because we need to, right? Because it's affecting us. The majority of millennials say financial stress compromises their ability to focus and be productive at work. A quarter of you says financial stress has caused you to feel physically ill, and 68% of millennials report debt having a negative impact on their relationships with significant others, colleagues, and friends. So the Bible talks a lot about money. Jesus talks a lot about money. Why? Because money's tethered to your life. And he cares about your life, and he cares about your heart, and it's affecting the health of your relationships, of your future, and your physical body. So we got to talk about this. So it's interesting where we are. We've been talking about the Sermon on the Mount, like Dorian said, and if you missed it, the Sermon on the Mount begins with how to get in. Jesus is saying, I'm building a kingdom, a system of rule. Here's how you get in. And the way you get in is he said, blessed are the poor in spirit. You don't buy your way in, you admit your poverty. You admit I'm spiritually in need. That's who gets in, the one who comes with empty hands and lets God fill them with his mercy and grace. That's how it starts. I am poor in spirit, I mourn that, but I hunger for righteousness, and God says, I give it to you, right? Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. You'll be filled. So you get in by the sheer grace of a benevolent God. And then the second part of the sermon, the last couple weeks, have all been about, all right, now that you're in, don't be fake. It's basically a way to summarize a big chunk of the sermon. He's like, hey, we're not gonna do heartless religious performance. The world doesn't need hypocritical religious people. So Jesus has been confronting kind of a superficial religiosity. And some of you have been all about that. Every sermon you'd be like, yeah, I hate people who are religious, fake. And he's like, yeah, that's right, it's fake, but don't be a pagan either, is where we are now. He's like, so yeah, you don't want the hypocrisy of the religious, but don't then use that as justification to pursue the materialism of the irreligious. He said, so don't be religiously fake, but don't be pagan either. There's a third way. It's called being sincere, means without cracks, having integrity, that what I say and what I do match, that what I profess, I actually perform, that what I believe, I actually live. It's called being a real one, not being fake. That if I say there's a God in heaven who rules this place and I call him Lord, then I let him shape what I do, what I think about, what I care about, what I chase. I follow him. And so Jesus, when he's gonna say that, let's be sincere, he starts with your wallet, because that's where it gets real. You can say whatever you want, but if I wanna know what you really believe is valuable, I check your bank statements, right? Because your credit card statement is your doctrinal statement about what is real and has value in your life. And so he starts there, and he's gonna give us, really on the heels of the Lord's Prayer that Brad taught us last week. Remember, the Lord's Prayer starts real big. Lord, hallowed be your name. Let your name be valued and glorified in the world. Let your kingdom come and your will be done. That's the first part. You, your kingdom, your glory, your power. And then it says, and then give me bread, give me forgiveness, give me the power to forgive others. So these big your glory, and then me, will you provide for me and take care of me? That's what we pray for. God, I want to pursue your glory, and I want you to provide for me. And then what Jesus is going to do here is say, yeah, we're supposed to pray that way, and now let's live that way. That I want to live for the glory of God, and then I want to trust him to provide for me. That's kind of the blanket over this whole statement. Man, I pursue him, he provides for me. That's how this works. And he's going to present us all these dichotomies in this passage. I don't know if you caught it. There's two treasures, earth and heaven. There's two conditions, light and dark. There's two masters, God and mammon. There's two preoccupations. Our bodies are the kingdom. And you have to choose. We're at a crossroads today. And so he says in verse 19, don't lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Did I say in heaven earlier? Treasures on earth are the bad ones. Treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. An important distinction to make at the beginning here is wealth is not evil. And saving is not evil. We don't have time to read all the verses around this, but God is not anti-savings. There's actually a lot of verses like Proverbs 6 that commends making provision for the future. The book of Proverbs celebrates the ant that stores in the summer to provide for itself in the winter. And in the New Testament, passages like 1 Timothy celebrate you making provision for your children, your grandchildren, and your aging parents. So the Bible is all about making provision for your people. The Bible is not anti-saving. And it's not anti-enjoying. Paul says it twice in 1 Timothy, that we're meant to enjoy the good gifts the Creator gave us. So I'm not telling you to renounce brunch, right? That you're meant to save and you're meant to enjoy, but the Bible is anti-hoarding. That's the difference. The key phrase here was don't store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. John Stott says it this way. Jesus forbids selfish accumulation of goods, extravagant and luxurious living, the hard-heartedness which does not feel the colossal need of the world's underprivileged people, the foolish fantasy that a person's life consists in the abundance of their possessions, and the materialism which tethers our hearts to the earth. He's saying, I'm not anti-saving, I'm anti-hoarding, that you store up a bunch for me. And you have to judge your heart. Many people hoard in the name of saving, and you have to judge, what am I doing? Is this about my kids or is this about me? But it's interesting to look at how Jesus argues. The way Jesus argues with us is, notice, he says, don't store up treasures on earth. And then he talks about clothes. That's what moths can eat. He's talking about your fashion. Don't store up a bunch of fashion. Then he's talking about valuables. That's where he talks about rust, that it could be corroded like your metals. Or whatever is not corruptible could be stolen. Thieves could take it. And so what's his point here? The problem with hoarding up material possessions, why Jesus brings it up to us, is he says, hey, they're not secure. You're spending your energy on things that are not enduring. There's nothing safe here. It won't last. And then he says, where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be. It's interesting how Jesus is arguing with us. Do you notice that? The assumption behind his argument is that you have a heart and you have a soul that's valuable. And he's saying, don't take your valuable soul and aim it at something less valuable. He's arguing from greater to lesser. He's saying, don't take your eternal soul and use it to chase temporal things because they're gonna fade. They're gonna go away, and I don't want you to. He's warning us about playing the wrong game. He's saying this is a bad investment strategy. I've given you an eternal soul with an eternal purpose. Don't aim it at something that's less than you. Your life is too valuable. Make sure your pursuit is worthy of it. And so he says, you have an eternal soul. Aiming it towards perishing goods is a bad investment, right? That's the danger of greed. It causes you to aim at the wrong things and miss what life's really about, because living is about more than having. And the deceptiveness of wealth is you'll start to think that's what it's about. I've got to accumulate these things to make me a success. Ask in your own mind, what is success? I guarantee you, for many of us, the danger that comes up in our mind is fame and power and money. Whoa, those are not the same as success. And Jesus says, if you aim to hoard up a pile, it will go away. That's a bad investment of you. He's saying, I gotta warn you, you're playing the wrong game. It's like, I remember for me when I was in football in high school, we had a new middle linebacker and we were about to go play a game. This is big to see if we can win. And I remember we're in the locker room before and everyone's trying to get focused on the game, how we're gonna perform. And the entire time we were in the locker room, he was in front of the mirror doing this. And then finally I was like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, I just want to make sure I look right. He kept fixing his hair and I was like, you're about to wear a helmet. It's like, shouldn't you be focused on, I don't know, football? That's why we're here. Your jersey's gonna get messy, your pads are gonna get disheveled. Focus on the game, man. You're focusing on the wrong thing. And the problem is you're gonna waste our time. It's Schindler's List. I mean, if you've seen the movie about the life of the man Schindler, what happened? As a war broke out, he saw this war breaking out across his country and he said, wow, what an awesome opportunity to store up wealth for me. And he used the war for profiteering. I will use this for my own money. Until he saw people dying. And it suddenly dawned on him, you have a soul and you have value. You're more important than money. And I'm either gonna use money to help you or I'm gonna use you to help me get money. And he repented. This is wrong. And he changed. And he began to leverage his wealth to set people free. And the way they did the movie with Liam Neeson, do you remember at the end, he's crying because he looks and he was like, why did I keep this ring? This ring could have been 5 people. Why did I keep this watch? This watch could have been 10 people. And he's realizing, I cared about all this stuff that doesn't matter. It's gonna go away, who cares? There's people on the line here. And so if all you're doing is chasing wealth because you think it's success, you're playing the wrong game. Your soul's worth more than that. My kids and I have a game we used to play on the iPad, and the game's called Don't Starve. which is a great title. It really summarizes the game. You're this little character, and the goal is to not starve to death. And so you start by just accumulating resources. Let me get some sticks and some grass so I can start a fire and get some rocks to kind of build it, and maybe I'll build a shelter, and then I got to go forage for food, and maybe if you're really organized and not dead yet, you can lash together a boat, go to a different island to get more resources, and you just accumulate resources to not starve. But after a while, if you're good at it and can stay alive, you keep accumulating resources, and then you can kind of upgrade. You can upgrade to a little bit nicer fire pit. You can maybe get a cooking stove. You can get a little bit nicer house. And then you have to start building these treasure boxes where you can put your goods in it. And then after you build all this up, the kids are like, well, what's next? And I'm like, well, we got all our resources. Well, what do we do now? Well, now we just walk around it in circles and defend it from the crocodiles and monkeys that are going to try to take it. And so the whole game is you just defending your resources. They're like, how long do you do this? Until you die? Well, that's kind of a dumb game. Yeah, I don't think I want to play that game anymore. So we played Monopoly. And I remember as we played Monopoly, it was interesting. It was very exciting at the beginning because you're like, ooh, I got some money. And you're like, yeah. And then what you do is you invest that money into real estate, and then you try to maximize the productivity of that real estate in order to gain a profit. And they're like, great. And then my sweet middle daughter, Sparrow, was like, great, so how much money till we're all happy? And it's like, no, that's the wrong question. You continue to aggressively and relentlessly pursue your wealth until you crush the dreams of other humans. Then as I'm explaining this, it gives me pause. Like, I don't want to play this anymore. I don't want to play this. Let's play Pictionary or something else. Let's read a book, because these games aren't worthy of us, right? And Jesus is arguing with you. Here's why he's not trying to get your money. He's fine. He's saying, hey, where your treasure is, that's where your heart is. What you strive to possess is going to possess you, and your heart's valuable. Don't stick your valuable heart to things that are going to fade. So he's fighting for you, not your money. And that's really the next metaphor he uses. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye's healthy, your whole body's full of light. If your eye's bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is that darkness? It's kind of a convoluted illustration, but he's carrying the idea that your eyes are like a lamp that let light into the body. So if you focus on light, you're illuminated with light. If you focus on the dark, you're filled with darkness. The eye informs the heart. And he's grabbing this from wisdom literature, like Psalm says it in Psalm 119. The psalmist prayed, incline my heart to your testimonies and not towards selfish gain. Turn my eyes from looking at worthless things and give me life in your ways. So it's the same idea. I want my eyes focused on the right things because the eyes inform the heart. The focus of my eyes informs the desires of my heart. And the focus of my eyes reveals the desires of my heart. It's a loop. That what I look at, I care about. And what I care about, I look at, and it begins to reinforce itself over and over and over again. What you behold shapes what you become. And what holds your gaze molds your soul. So Jesus is saying, watch it. Watch what you care about, because there's a bigger game. There's treasures in heaven. The only thing around here that's going to survive are the souls of other people. So when he's talking about treasures in heaven, he's saying, leverage your life and your goods for the sake of people. That's what you want to celebrate. You want to see people come to know Jesus and find quality of life and trust God. You want to leverage your goods for the sake of other people's lives. That's the worthy goal that's worthy of your heart and soul. To settle for less than that, to just focus on, no, I got to build my kingdom and my power and my glory. He says that is so dangerous because you're just focused on darkness, and it's going to make a darkness in you. It's Ebenezer Scrooge. No one wants to be Ebenezer Scrooge. What happened? He got so concerned with building his little kingdom that he was cruel and miserly to human beings. Wouldn't even give Bob Cratchit some coal, bro. And finally, what had to break him loose? His own realizations? No. Supernatural jacking with him all night long. And how did they do it? Let me show you the mentor you blew off. Let me show you the love you lost. And let me show you the people who will not even know you when you're gone. You sacrificed relationships and love with people to pursue success. That's a mistake. Because it was a mistake of success. Rather than focused on the light of loving people made in my image, you focused on the dark of building your kingdom for your glory, and now it's all gone. And when he saw the grave and realized that's a wasted life, he wanted to change things. I don't want to set my mind on that anymore, because when I set my mind there, it shapes my mindset. And the course and the quality of our life is shaped and determined by what you believe is valuable. Because what you value shapes your values, what shapes your priorities, what shapes your decisions, what shapes your life. What's more important to you? What do you pray for the most often? What do you think about the most often? Let me tell you something. If we follow your thoughts, your prayers, your emotions, and your wallet, it is a path that leads to a throne. What is sitting on that throne? You be careful. You be careful, because some of us are building our lives on things that will fade. And what's interesting is Jesus is picking up something that's been consistent all through the scriptures. Like, why did God give us wealth? What is wealth even for? Well, you see in the nation of Israel, when God set them free from slavery, I'm setting you free, I'm marching you through the wilderness into the promised land. God gave them their daily bread, right? Every day, manna would fall from heaven. Now, did that mean they didn't have to work? No, because the manna would melt in midday. You wake up at noon, no manna for you. You got to work, right? God provides, but you got to work. But what happens at the end of the day? If you hoarded it, worms got in it. He said, I don't want you to hoard it. And so what would they do? Everyone would measure it out, and if you had an excess, you'd give it to somebody else. Maybe they were older and not as good at manna collection as you. Maybe you're an engineer and really kind of maximized your manna collecting possibilities, and they're over there like, oh no, I can sing a song, and they don't know what they're doing. You're like, oh man, here's some toast. And you're trying to help this person out. But why the excess wealth? Not to accumulate for you, but to give to them. And God made them do that every day, and he told them why. He says, it's so that you might know you don't live on bread alone, but every word that comes from the mouth of God. He said, I'm trying to sync you up with reality. It's not all about bread, man. God is writing a story, and I want to use you to be a light to the nations. And if I want you to pursue my kingdom, I'm going to provide for you. That's the deal he works out. You seek my kingdom, and I'll provide what you need. And then he tells them why later. He says, hey, I'm about to lead you into a land that's flowing with milk and honey. You're going to have wines and vats and barns and cattle and animals. And he says, and there's a danger there. Take care lest you forget the Lord your God. Take care lest you've eaten your fill and build your houses, and beware lest you say, my power, my might of my hand got me this wealth. He says, don't do that. Remember the Lord your God who gives you power to get wealth. He says, that's the danger of money. It deceives you, distorts reality, and derails you. That you suddenly think you're the one who did this. It's like Christopher Reeves is my Superman. I don't know who yours is. Doesn't really matter. Christopher Reeves is mine. And I don't know if you've ever saw the original Superman. There's this terrible scene I would always fast forward as a child where Superman is romantically getting to know Lois, and he decides to take her flying. And as they fly, she's reciting this poem. And as a kid, you're like, boring, and kind of fast forward. But as they're flying, she's like, oh, you're like a star or whatever. I don't know. I never listened to it. But he's holding her and she's scared, but then she gets less scared. And then he begins to hold her hand. And then they're both balanced, and she's holding his hand and he's holding hers. And they're flying along. And at one point, she starts to feel good. She's balanced. She feels like she's got this. So she looks at him. She's like I'm flying. And so she lets go of his hand and plummets to the earth. And you're like, you fool. Who'd you think was powering this whole operation? You didn't suddenly get the power to fly. Superman provided for you. It's what Kirk was saying earlier. He was just summarizing 1 Corinthians 4. What do you have you didn't receive? And if you received it, why do you boast as if you didn't? This is all a gift from God, and at one day it's all going back to him. But how did you use it? And so if you're pursuing wealth, you're playing the wrong game, hoarding the wrong treasure. And number two, you're doing that because you're trusting the wrong God. And that's where he gets real in verse 24. He says, no one can serve two masters. You'll either hate one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. And I know some of y'all read that and you're like, sure you can. I work 2 jobs. Heck, I work 4 jobs. It's not talking about employers. It's talking about masters. What owns you? And he says, you can't serve both. Now, the reality is, you don't serve money. I love the way John Piper said this. You don't serve money by meeting money's needs. How can I serve you today, money? You want a glass of water? That's not how it works. How do you serve money? You serve money by looking to it to provide for you. You give me security. You give me status. It's interesting. He brings up food and clothing. Why does he bring up those things? What is clothing about? Covering your nakedness? Yes. But a lot of it's about fashion. How do I look? How do I look to you? Why do I care how I look to you? Because I want to be approved of. I want to be thought as worthy. I want to be thought of as valuable. I want acceptance. And food is also a status symbol. When you have friends come over, you don't want cheese whiz, you want charcuterie, right? Why? Because it's about you, right? So it's about security and status. I want to feel worthwhile and accepted. We go to money for the same reasons people go to God. That I want the way I look and the way I eat to say something about my value. And he says, you're going to the wrong place for that. You're coming to money and saying, money, if I just trust you, if I just do what you say, if I just hustle and chase you, you're going to provide for me. Provide for me acceptance, provide for me satisfaction, provide for me security. You're going to take care of me. But the problem is, money doesn't care about you. It's a bad switch. It's a bad God. Proverbs 18 says, the name of the Lord is a strong tower. The righteous man runs to it and is safe. A rich man's wealth is his strong city, and it's a high wall in his imagination. Do not toil to acquire wealth. Be discerning enough to desist. When your eyes light on it, it is gone. Suddenly it sprouts wings, flying like an eagle towards heaven. In 2009, Sports Illustrated did a report on NFL players. By the time they had retired for 2 years, 78% of former NFL players had gone bankrupt or were under financial stress because of joblessness and divorce. Everyone from Johnny Unitas to Michael Vick. And within 5 years of retirement, an estimated 60% of NBA players are broke. Right? Money is a mistress that will leave you in a heartbeat. She's not with you for better or for worse. She's with you for better. And if it gets worse, money gone, right? But that's the deceptiveness of money. We look to it to provide for us, and God says, hey, you be careful. 1 Timothy 6 says, instruct those who are rich in this present world, don't be conceited or fix their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy. He says, that's the danger. Money will trick you into thinking it'll provide for you, but it'll leave, and that's dangerous because it'll hurt you. It'll waste your life. It's a good tool. It's a bad God. I heard a pastor say it this way once, and it was so convicting to me. He said, I have never in all my life had a man with a great wife, great kids, and a deep love for God pull up at my house for counseling and weep because he drove a Ford. He said, but I have had many men drive up to my house in a luxurious car and weep bitterly because of their bad marriage, their rebellious kids, and their empty heart. He said, because they believed the lie. I will chase this money and it'll provide for me. And he says, no, it won't. It'll take more from you. Money's a good tool. You use it to meet your needs, enjoy a meal, build a family, buy a house, but you don't hoard it because that's toxic to you. And you can't trust it. It'll hurt you, right? It's a bad practice. That's why God in the Old Testament was constantly saying, hey, throw barbecues. All through the Old Testament, it was like barbecue central. But invite the stranger and the poor and the widow. Make sure you're leveraging that money for other human beings because they're what really matters. But if you chase it for you, it's not secure. It's a good tool. It's a bad God. That's why he constantly calls it idolatry to chase money because it'll hurt you. It'll hurt you. He said in 1 Timothy 6, you brought nothing into this world. You can take nothing out of it either. If you have food and covering, with that we shall be content. But those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a snare and many foolish and harmful desires which plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all sorts of evil. And some, by longing for it, have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. But flee from these things, you man of God. I heard a pastor say it this way, and I thought it was great. He said there's 4 kinds of people who make lots of money. Number 1 is the person who has the right idea at the right time, and that idea has its day. The guy who invented the hula hoop. Bang, right moment, you win, right? You're like a mosquito hitting an artery. You don't even know what happened. Whoa, suddenly you're blowing up, right? Number 2 is someone who has an ability that everyone wants to use. You have an amazing voice, right? You have a preternatural gift with accounting. Mike Tyson, you can punch someone so hard in the face, they forget the names of their children, and we'll pay you $100 million to watch you do it. Right? You have a gift that's rare in the world. Right? Number 3 is you have an innate ability to invest. I have a few friends like this. They just get it. It just makes sense to them. Right? They're Matt Damon in Good Will Hunting. I can just play. They just understand it. You give them $100, the next time you look at them, it's $10,000. What did you do? You hand them a failing restaurant chain, it'll be profitable and making millions the next year. There's just people that just have that ability to know how to do it. They work 8 hours a day, they go home and have dinner with their family every night, they're raising some kids, and they're making millions of dollars, like, oops, and you're like, okay. And there's those people that they just know how to do it. How many of us in this room are those 3 people? Don't raise your hand. I know we're in DC, all of us are like easy. Be honest. There's a 4th kind of person that can get rich. And you have a good set of skills that God gifted you with, and you go, I can work 40, 50 hours a week and make a good living amount of money, or I can work 70, 80, and I can make more money. And I can hustle on weekends, Saturday and Sunday, and I can keep going. I can keep hustling. I can fire. And I'll tell the kids I'll get to them later. I'll tell the wife I'll get to them later. I'm going to keep hustling, because if I hustle, I can make 30,000 more, 50,000 more, 100,000 more. And that's great. You can do that. But what did you sell in the process? And there are so many people in America that they build up their little pile of wealth and then cut it in half. Why? Because they sold their family and their kids for money. And so most of you in here are like, Ben, I don't have any kids, so I'm going to chase that money. Well, I'm just telling you, you got to figure this out now, because it's not going to be easier later. That's why Jesus is like, let me teach you this rule with manna, because when suddenly you get to the farm in the promised land, you're not going to suddenly figure this out. If you can't give $10 now, you're not going to give 10,000 later. We got to fix this now. He says, I'm trying to save your life, save your marriage, save your kids, save your soul. Don't believe the lie. Money's a good tool. It's a bad God. You use it, but don't serve it. Don't look to it to meet your needs. Look to me to meet your needs. And so I love the way he ends it. He doesn't say by give, although I will say this, giving is a declaration to the world that I will not buy into your broken system, right? Because whatever you can't release possesses you. And so when you release that money, what are you saying? I don't look to you to provide for me. I don't look for you to take care of me. I release you. And I feel the freedom to preach this because we already did the giving moment. Some of you are like, he's just going for that check. No, we already did it. Too late, right? I'm just telling you this because it's good for you. It'll set you free. If you're scared at the idea of giving money to people, that's what's so crazy is when you're at your funeral, what do you want us to say about you? Oh, she hustled for that money. She loved it, chased it. She would cast off a friend. She would shiv you for $5. She loved that money. She died cold-hearted, but I gotta respect it. Or at her funeral, are you like, you know what? They were generous. And I was always too proud to ask, but they knew me well enough to know when I was hurting. She would come up and say, hey, take this from me. Hey, no, I got you. No, don't worry about it. Hey, and you would look, and she'd be in her prayer closet praying for the nations. You would look, and she was writing checks for Compassion Kids so someone in Africa could have an education because she exists and has a job, that this person was continually flowing blessing out in a wake behind them. That's the life you celebrate at a funeral. That's what we want to be true of us. But if you can't release any money now, you be careful. What's your value? Follow the trail. It leads to a throne. And some of us are chasing a God that's going to take everything from you and give nothing back. And God is saying, I'm trying to save you from that. And here's where it ends, which is great, is it doesn't end with, and we won't incidentally have a time to unpack all these verses right now. Maybe we'll come back to it in 2 weeks. Yay. Jesus ends by addressing the root cause of why we're scared to let go of our money. And he says it 3 times. Don't be anxious. Don't be anxious. Don't be anxious. He knows we're afraid. If I let go of money, I won't have status. I won't have acceptance. I won't have the lifestyle I want. I won't starve. I'll be naked. I won't be provided for. We're looking to money to be our provider. And Jesus says, I want you to trust me. That's why, did you notice he calls us, oh, you of little faith? At the end of the day, this isn't about your money. It's about your heart. What are you trusting to provide for you? Because if you don't believe there's a God, that's okay. I'm glad you're here. Hope you'll keep coming back because there is a God and he wants you to know him. But if you don't believe there's a God, Paul says, hey, if there's no resurrection from the dead, eat, drink, and be merry, tomorrow you die, it doesn't matter. But if you say there is a God and he really is moving in the universe, and there really are people who are beautiful because they're made in the image of God, but broken and dead because of sin, and God has really done something decisive about it through Jesus, who buried your sin in the grave and beat death and rose and is triumphantly calling people into his kingdom for his power and his glory, that is a cause worthy of you. And money is a tool to that end. And God says, you pursue me, you seek first my kingdom, I'll provide for you. And what I love about it at the end is he just calls you to faith. Just trust me. Trust me. He said, your life's about more than food and clothing. Your life's more valuable than that. Look at the birds. I feed them, and I like you more than them. He says, I'm not their dad, they're my pet, but I'm your father. Trust my dad's heart. I love it. He says later in the sermon, he was like, what dad, if a kid asks for bread, is going to give him a stone? If he asks for a snack, he's going to give him a snake. I love that. Jesus said that, right? Dad, can I have a fish? Yeah, sure, I got something for you. A snake! He's like, what dad would do that? And yet we think if I trust God, he's going to hurt me and not provide for me. And so Jesus is challenging your faith today. Who do you trust? So that anxiety isn't going to add a span to the hour of your life. It's actually going to statistically take some of your life from you. That clothing, I'm clothing the fields with flowers. I'll clothe you, a little faith. It's the Gentiles, those who don't know God, that say, what am I going to eat? What am I going to drink? What am I going to wear? The people who don't know there's a God worry like that. But the people who know they have a heavenly Father, they rest. They're secure. So you seek first my kingdom, and I'll provide for you. Last story, and I won't tell all of it. You know, for Donna and I, long story, very short, when we decided to move here to DC, we left Texas. I don't know if you know much about real estate. It costs more up here. And so we had a house with a swimming pool and a dog in Texas, but we were like, you know what? I remember hitting the moment in Texas. We're like, dude, we could do it. We got the house, we got the pool, we got the dog, we got the life. We could just click into neutral and coast out till I die. And as I was following the Lord, I was like, but I don't want that to be true of me. There's too much adventure he put in our hearts. There's too much seek. Notice the repetition of that verb, seek, seek, seek. He wants us to pursue something worthy of our hearts. And long story short, Pastor Louis challenged us to launch a Passion City church in another city. And Don and I, as we visited DC, we're like, we think this is it. And a lot of people confirmed that with us and processed that with us. But as we did that, we realized this is going to come at a cost. And we sold the house and the pool and the yard and gave away the dog. And I remember as we got here, we moved into a little row house. And we're like, you know what? A row house for the glory of God is worth it. We'll be renters for the glory of God. That's okay. And yet, someone came to community group. We got to know him. And over time, she invited us to a Cinco de Mayo party at her house. We said yes. We showed up at her house. And we're like, this neighborhood's awesome. Y'all have yards? This is nuts. And she was like, you know, the house across the street's been abandoned for 20 years. Like, abandoned? What does that mean? She was like, well, she just moved away and kept the lights on, kept the water on. We checked on it for her, but she never came back in 2 decades. I'm going to call her. We're like, okay. So she calls Miss Judy, and we start talking to Miss Judy. She had died, or her husband had died. They didn't have kids. She moved home to take care of her aging dad, and we just got to know her. She was out on the farm with her chickens and raccoons that she would feed, and we would talk on the phone. She read my book on dating. She listened to my wife's music. We just became friends. And finally, she was like, I want to sell you my house. And we said, we'll never afford your house. Do you know what I do for a living? And she knocked an extraordinary amount of money off the price of that house. And we moved in right before the pandemic hit and had a yard for our kids to play in so that Dad didn't go insane. And then I looked at it the other day out of curiosity. You know what's weird about it? The square footage of the yard, exact same I had in Texas. Square footage of the house, exact same we had in Texas. Except it takes 5 minutes to get to the Washington Monument. And I looked and I was like, okay, Lord, you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to do that. And I'm not saying you chase the Lord and he's going to give you that house. You get a house. Like, I'm not saying that. We're all going to die. The world is difficult and it will take our life, but what Jesus promises us is life beyond the grave, and he proved it, and he purchased it with his blood. And he says, trust me. I have a purpose for your life that's bigger than just storehousing clothes. I have a purpose for your life that's bigger than what car you drive. Get a car that works. Get a house that works. Use the possessions to pursue a greater purpose. And trust me, you seek my kingdom, I'll take care of you. You pursue me, I'll provide for you. And he offers us the liberty from anxiety. And that's what I want from you today. I don't want your money, I want your freedom. That you'd be free from the tyranny of money, right? That you could use it as a tool and not be possessed by it as a slave. That's what Jesus is offering, a different way, a new way for those who will trust him. And I love that that's where he ends it. He ends it with faith. Do you trust me? And some of you in here, you've never put your faith in Jesus. That's what he wants from you. That's what he's asking for. When Jesus was asked, what does the Father want? He says to believe in the one he sent. That's the entrance to the kingdom. I'm poor in spirit and I mourn that, but I'm hungering for righteousness. And he says, it's in me. I'm the righteous one who gives my righteousness to you because I buried your sin in the grave. So you put your faith in him. Long before you give a thing, you need to receive what he's done. And some of us, we trust him when we say, man, Lord, I trusted you, but my bank account tells a different story. And I want to trust you with my money and my time and my energy. Will you increase my faith? And I get it that some of you are like, man, I don't know if I buy any of this, but I'm here because I think there's something more than just stockpiling goods to give to somebody when I'm dead. And I would say you're right. And if you have questions, that's okay. God's not scared of them. You just keep coming back. Because I have confidence if you seek him, you'll find him because he's not far from anybody.